So, with all that in mind, I've got some tabs on the go here, and I went through the survey again, and I've marked up various points of interest. And I'm going to go through these with you and just kind of talk about it, actually. So let's just do that. Okay. Right. Now, the first thing is the guy, the surveyor, says yes, it's got some issues, some maintenance issues. We know that, but what tellingly he talks about the structure of the property being reasonable. And having looked at this again, I agree, and wholeheartedly, in fact. And I'm going to talk about that. So he talks about various things like windows and some stuff on the roof and so on that need attention, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And what I've done is I've gone through this prior to this, and I've highlighted points of interest, which makes the video a little quicker for you, and therefore it's a better thing. So right, the the roof is okay, the chimney is okay, but one of the things I'm not really clear about is that on this chimney you've got a cowling, on this chimney you don't, as far as I can see. Now there may be some system uh, which means that water that comes through the chimney drains away, but I think that this may be leading to some of the damp that we'll see later in the survey. All right, now if I zoom out a little bit and we just carry on. And he talks about the slates being in reasonable condition, one slate and a broken slate, but that's fine. It's a relatively minor issue. There's a thing you can do called tingling. Sounds a bit weird, but what you do is you have a slate like that. You've got a slate underneath. The slate underneath is broken. You take the slate out. You've got battens, and you nail in a strip of copper or lead, and then you slot the slate back in, and then you have a little curl bit at the end, and so the slate is held in place. So that's how that works. But overall, this roof is in really pretty reasonable condition, in fact. This needs a little bit of work, but this is all fairly minor stuff. And also the other thing, by the way, I've been talking to Joe, the builder, about this property and the survey and so on. So, I'm kind of, I feel like I'm better informed about all of this. Now, he says solid brick. Yes, I agree. And how do I know that? Because the the main walls have these things called tie bricks. So these would be single bricks, and they kind of run in the cavity wall. You've got brick, cavity, brick, and then when you're looking at it sideways, all the bricks are kind of lozenge shaped. And then in a solid wall, you have side brick, solid brick, and then that ties the two layers of brick together. Anyway, it's not, it just is what it is. And the wall looks fine and everything looks good. So now this is quite an important point, that there's no damp-proof course in the front, but there is on the back. And that ties in with the issue where there's damp at the front of the building, but there's no damp at the back of the building. All right, so we've got this issue here with the gutter and the lintel and so on. That's really not that much of a deal. It's a trellis scaffolding. It's just pulling this apart, redoing the brickwork. It shouldn't be an issue. And you can see here, in fact, that that this is a stone lintel, so it's not going to sag, it's not going to rot, and therefore that's good. And it also means that it's a better than totally basic building. Now it does have, I won't say a damp-proof course, but it has like an early, like a 19th century, this property was built around 1900, and it's got something here which acts as effectively like a damp-proof course, but it's not especially, it's not super effective. And you can see that here. So really just injecting it is straightforward because you've got access to it. You can see, drill the holes in, put the stuff in, and then it spreads out, leaches out, and then seals the course. So the next thing is that window handles loose. That's a very small issue. Now some of these glazing panels have gone. This one's got a condensation. I don't know if you can see that. But fixing these is relatively straightforward. They're clipped in. You undo the clips. The glass panes pop out. You put new panes in. So as a renovation task, it's really very straightforward. And the next thing is inside the property, and here we go here. So this is a really important point, that the felt is old-fashioned. So no bitumen felt is breathable, by the way, because it's got bitumen on it. So this roof was not original to the house, because when the house was built, there was no such thing as bitumen felt. And what I think's happened is that the property had a major renovation probably about 50 to 60 years ago. So we're talking 1960s, I would imagine, when this kind of technology started coming through. And it also correlates with another thing. So he's talking about a bit of moisture, and my view is that's not really an issue. It's winter, of course there's moisture, and it's not excessive moisture. So the guy with his protometer, it's called, if the red mark is right up there, then that's a serious problem. It's absolutely soaking. And if it's down there, it's bone dry. And this is just somewhere slightly above okay. So it's okay in my opinion. And the same story here. There's no signs of wood rot or anything like that. Now this is the next important point. So the ceilings are made from plasterboard. Now, original, let's see if I can find a picture. It's just stuff, something you might learn and find interesting if you like all this kind of stuff. So plaster and lath. Now I'll find an image of it. Here we go. So here's a good example actually. So plaster and lath is how walls were plastered in the past. So today you have plasterboard. Back then you had this kind of thing going on, and the problem with it is that the surfaces are never that flat and it's quite fragile. So these old plaster walls are very prone to cracking, and if they go, the whole thing, it's a mess. So somebody some time ago, like as I say, 50, 60 years ago perhaps, maybe even less, I don't know, but somebody did the renovation, sorted it out, and took out probably nearly all of the plaster and lath. So this is good. He talks here about some condensation. That's not a problem. The good thing from what I see is that the fundamentals of this property are reasonably good. So fundamentally, it was reasonably well built when it was built, and it's had a deep renovation, like a back to brick renovation in its history, which means that it's basically sound, and that's good. So the next thing is talks about more mold and lack of yeah. So a lot of this is just lack of ventilation, especially in places like the bathroom. So it's where people don't open up the windows properly and let the air circulate, and therefore you know somebody has a shower, you get moisture and that sort of issue. It's a kind of non-issue. And here we have some mold around the, yeah. Now this kind of thing generally occurs because either the glazing isn't quite fitted right, or because of condensation. So people don't ventilate the bedroom properly. They sleep overnight. You build up a lot of moisture in the air, and then you get condensation here. It's again not much of a deal. Now the next thing is this. So some damaged plaster. Fine. Let's fix the plaster. And then we have this. Now, you remember earlier I said on the chimney there was no coving on the chimney pot? I I think this rising damp might be something to do with that, maybe. But in any event, it's not widespread, and it's just simply where the fireplace has been blocked up. So it needs maybe some damp-proof work, but certainly the chimney pots, which are open to the elements, I think they need covering over. And the reason I think this is not actual rising damp is because it's at the chimney, and that's it. There's no other damp anywhere else in that area. Then he talks about damp in the hallway, so let's just have a look at the floor plan because that'll help you visualize everything. And can I make this bigger? I hope I can. Okay, there we go, it's a bit bigger. All right, so he's talking about damp here, and that would make sense. So you've got a separating wall, and it was never damp-proof coursed properly, and you got some rising damp. So fine. What does that mean? It means that some of the plaster in the hallway, this plaster, the radiator would have to be removed, the plaster would have to be chipped off, and to a certain height, I don't know, they say a meter, but it might be less, and then you inject with damp-proofing goop in the bricks, and then you let it dry, and then you paint over it. So again, it's a relatively straightforward process. And then, okay, so on the damp thing, so front wall to the dining room. So again, let's have a look at the thing here. So here's the dining room, front wall. That makes sense. So it needs a bit of damp proofing here. The good thing about this is that it's accessible from the outside, so you don't have to chip away any plaster. You drill holes, just like you saw earlier with the other wall, you drill the holes in the wall, and then you put the goop in, and then it does its thing. So that's a relatively straightforward task as far as I can see. And then dining room and hallway. So that would be, let's think about that. So moisture reading between the dining, let's have a look. Between the dining room and the hallway, so he's talking about that. Okay, I don't know if that's a serious issue or not. The thing is, the wall isn't molding up. So if you get mold on the wall, then that's a problem. There isn't. It's just elevated, so it's okay. This is a bit borderline, but again, no mold. So I'm not that concerned about it. And damp. So really, there isn't actually that much damp. Needs new carpets. Everything's a bit threadbare. Floors are level. I'll just zoom it out. And where else was it? Yeah, this is the rear chimney breast. So he says affected by damp. Now, again, I'm going to go back to my point about, so you've got one here, and I assume you've got the other chimney breast here, because it probably would be. And if we go back to the pictures of the house, where are the pictures of the house? Here we go. And I'll go back to the photos. Well, anyway, so if you look at the survey, I just don't want to jump around on the survey too much, but there's the damp. And then, okay, so you got that. I really do think it's more to do with the chimney than anything. I don't think there's a serious damp issue here with that. There might, so here there would have been a fireplace, and if there's any damp, again, chimney letting water in. But so far, this is all okay. This is much less onerous than I might have suggested in the past. And the reason for this is because I've talked to Joe. Joe knows stuff. I hope I kind of know what I'm talking about. But it all looks just like fairly regular stuff to do. And right, so some mold on the ceiling in the bathroom. Why? Because no ventilation. Okay, and then we have we have some red alerts on this, but this is because there isn't any certification. Decent boiler. So there are no issues to speak of with the circuit board, the gas, or anything like that. You just need it needs certification. And if the property is being sold, it should have all that. Then we have the backyard. Backyard's fine, not too overlooked. And what a nice big patio. And if this was jet washed, like cleaned nicely, it would come up beautifully. Back shed probably needs clearing out and possibly removing. And then just the usual back and forth. Not a great deal to say here. Now this is important, the valuation stuff. So he reckons it's worth about 90, which is close to 93. Then the question is, why does he think that? And we can have a look at his justification here. And here we have these. So the 190, so what I've done is I had a look through the sales history of some properties nearby. And if we look at this one, so this is 190, which would be very close. And it's, I'll see if I can make it bigger. Can I? Yes, I can. All right. So it's in comparable condition. It looks nicer, but it's not. It needs a lot of work. And it's hard to tell whether it's damp. It's got all this stuff in the garage. And this is, by the way, a big feature. The fact you've got such a big backyard, you can do an awful lot with it. But broadly, this is comparable. So if you think about when it was sold, the offer was probably accepted back in, well, let's say make it 3 months, and therefore the offer, that property was sold for, what was it, what was it sold for? He said 190, I think it was. So 190 and 88,500. So I think it's, or 86 and then adjusted, but the thing about the nationwide house price index is it's not that granular. And really, when you look at capital growth, you've got to go quite granular with it. And I think the growth around there is solid, and I think it's picking up. And that's because, well, let me pause and I'll show you why. Okay, I'm back. And right, so this is the capital growth data for CW1. And as you'll see here, from this, the rental turnover is huge and the sales demand is massive. So this area is actually quite hot. And the reason for that, I think, is because more and more investors are getting into the mix and they're kind of spreading out into places like Crewe. Originally, they might have looked at Manchester, but they're kind of just looking further afield, and therefore they're looking at places like this. So this is getting hot. And when I look at the capital growth data for this little patch, it's grown 10% above the rate of inflation up to March 21. So if you take that as a trajectory, you just generally think, where's this all going? If anything, the market has accelerated since then. So, and the reason it's March 21 is because the Office of National Statistics data hasn't been updated. When it is, I'll update this. But as a general indicator, it's really quite strong. And so in the last property cycle, in this area, the market went up 100%. So if you remember, and I'm sure I've talked about this, the capital growth, if I go capital growth by area, here we go. What's going on is that we're in the last cycle of the current property cycle. So you may have seen this, and this is property prices over the last 150, 170 years, and we've had 8 property cycles. We're into number 9, and this is the cycle. So we're now in the boom phase, and it's all a bit crazy. And getting more crazy. So if I look at CV1, I think it is, which is Crewe, or if I go, let's go just CV1, let's just see what Crewe is doing. Yeah, so overall, when you look at Crewe as a town, it's one of the top performers for capital growth recently. And um, interestingly, the last time around, well, this is so actually, you know what? It's not granular enough. Let me get the granular one because this helps. And it was CW1. Okay, CW1. And what's going on here? CW1. Okay, so it's growing solidly, but I know that 10%, this little patch. So what's going on with Crewe overall is that it's quite patchy. And you can see here, so like 1%, -3 in this little spot here. But when you get more central, you can see that's 10%, that's 6%. So this area, people like this area. This is strong. So my upshot is, let's go to